The boardroom at Arctis Solutions is the kind of room that makes you sit straighter the moment you step inside it. Floor-to-ceiling windows face the gray sweep of Hillcroft Business Park, and the long mahogany table catches the overhead lights in a way that makes every meeting feel consequential. I have sat in this room at least a dozen times, but today is different. Today, 4 months of late nights, careful research, and methodical drafting are about to be presented to the senior board of directors. Except I am not the one presenting it. 3 seats to my left, my line manager, Fabian Ware, stands at the podium, clicking through my slides. My graphs. My exact phrasing. The very words I typed at midnight on a rainy Tuesday, with cold tea beside me and color-coded notes spread across my desk. My name is Dara Whitmore. I am 28 years old, a mid-level strategy analyst at one of the largest consulting firms in the country. For 4 months, I gave this project everything I had, weekends, early mornings, evenings I should have spent resting, and now a man who contributed nothing to it is receiving a standing ovation in this very room. For someone else, the applause is generous. Someone at the far end of the table mouths brilliant. Fabian Ware smiles, not with joy, but with satisfaction. The kind that belongs to someone who knows precisely what they have just taken. I raise my hand to speak. He looks straight through me. Let us not confuse the team with junior input. Every head in the room nods. My throat closes. And just like that, I am erased. Have you ever watched someone steal the credit for your work in front of an entire room? Drop your experience in the comments below, because this story is only just getting started. I find Fabian in the corridor outside the boardroom 10 minutes after the presentation ends. He is adjusting his cuffs in the reflection of a glass partition, still visibly pleased with himself. I keep my voice low and level. I have learned, in 2 years at Arctis Solutions, that composure is the only currency a junior woman earns consistent respect with. Fabian, I say. That was my project. Every slide, every figure, every recommendation. You know that. He does not pretend to be surprised. He steps closer and lowers his voice, as though we are sharing a confidence rather than having a confrontation. You work for me, Dara. Everything you produce on company time belongs to the team, and I lead the team. That is simply how this works. He says it warmly. As though explaining it to me is a kindness. I turn toward the boardroom. Through the glass panel in the door, I can see my colleagues packing their notebooks away. 3 of them, people who sat beside me during development sessions, who read my early drafts, who praised my methodology quietly over coffee, will not meet my eyes. They look down. They find things to tidy. They develop a sudden interest in the floor. Not one person says a word. That is the moment that cuts the deepest, not Fabian's arrogance, which I had half expected, but the silence of people who know the truth and have already decided to protect themselves instead. I walk back to my desk alone. I sit down. I look at my screen for a long time without reading a single word on it. I have not been sleeping properly for 3 nights. Instead, I do what I have always done when something refuses to add up. I go looking for the data. Arctis Solutions' internal project archive is accessible to all permanent members of staff. It is clunky, outdated, and most people ignore it entirely. I spend 3 evenings working through it, filtering by Fabian Ware's name, cross-referencing submission dates, and reading version histories on old reports. What I find makes my stomach drop. Over the past 6 years, Fabian has been credited as the lead contributor on 3 major projects, each of which earned him a significant performance bonus. When I trace those projects back to their earliest saved drafts, the original authors are different people entirely: a junior analyst, a data specialist, a project coordinator. All 3 departed the company within 12 months of their projects being finalized. One transferred to a satellite office in Aberdeen and resigned 4 months later. Another received a poor performance review following a period of unexplained conflict with management and left quietly. The third simply vanished from the records, no forwarding note, no explanation on file. 3 people. 3 stolen projects. 3 exits that nobody appeared to question. This morning, a notification appeared on my work calendar, sent by Human Resources. A performance review is scheduled for the following Thursday. I close the archive tab and sit very still. My hands are steady. My chest is not. I am not simply a victim of one dishonest act. I am the next entry in a pattern that has run undisturbed in this building for years. The performance review takes place in a small glass-walled meeting room on the 4th floor. I arrive 2 minutes early. Fabian is already seated beside a human resources officer named Miss Boss, a composed, unreadable woman who writes everything in a slim dark notebook. The review document is 3 pages long. I read every word before I say anything. Lack of initiative. Poor collaboration. Difficulty integrating with senior leadership. Each charge is vague enough to be deniable and specific enough to be damaging. They are the kind of phrases designed not to leave bruises, but to build a paper trail. I studied employment documentation during my postgraduate degree, and I recognize this immediately, a clean, procedural method for making someone appear to be the problem. Fabian sits with his arms folded and his expression pained. He talks about me as though I am a student who has let her teacher down, with great regret and disappointment, and with zero acknowledgement of the reality that sits between us, like something solid on the table. I answer every point carefully. I do not raise my voice. I do not accuse him. I ask questions, request specific examples, and note that I have no previous warnings on record. Miss Boss writes everything down without expression. When the meeting ends, I take the long route back to my desk, along the ground floor corridor, past the reception area, because I need the air, the movement, and the space to think. It is there, near the shelving unit beside the archive room door, that I first notice her watching me. She is small and quiet in the way that genuinely observant people often are, the kind of person a room forgets the moment the door closes. She is perhaps 50 years old, with neat gray-streaked hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. Her staff lanyard reads Records and Archive, and she is holding a stack of manila folders against her chest as though they contain something worth protecting. She is watching me with an expression I cannot quite read. I stop walking. She steps toward me slowly, deliberately, the movement of someone who has rehearsed this approach in advance. Miss Whitmore, she says, very quietly. My name is Doris Farr. I work in the archive room on the ground floor. I would rather we did not have this conversation anywhere near a camera that can read lips. She hands me a folder. You are not the first person to come out of that review room wearing that particular expression, she says. But you might be the last, if you are careful. I open the folder right there in the corridor. Inside are printed pages, deleted draft documents recovered from the archive server, each bearing version timestamps. 3 of them carry author names in their metadata that do not match the official project credits. One file was last edited by the data specialist who later transferred to Aberdeen. Another was opened, renamed, and resubmitted under a different author header within 48 hours of the original author handing in her notice. I look up at Doris Farr. She nods once, slowly, and walks back into the archive room without another word. I spent the rest of that week building my own record. I start with what I can access legitimately, my sent emails with timestamped attachments, the version history of the shared project folder, and a saved draft of my original proposal dated 3 weeks before Fabian's presentation. I create a private document on a personal device. I log every relevant date, every file name, every email exchange. I number the entries. I cross-reference them. I keep the file encrypted and backed up in 2 separate places. But Fabian does not wait for me to build quietly. On the Friday of that same week, during an all-staff briefing in the main conference room, he stands before approximately 60 people and announces a new team initiative. Then he turns to look at me. Dara will be heading up administrative support for the Greenfield account refresh, a wonderful opportunity for her to develop some foundational skills. Polite, uncomfortable laughter ripples through the room. The Greenfield account is a low-value legacy client. Administrative support means filing and formatting documents written by others. It is not an opportunity. It is a signal, a message delivered publicly to every person in that room, telling them precisely where he believes I belong. I smile and write Greenfield account neatly in my notebook. That evening, as I am packing up my bag, I feel Doris Farr pass behind my chair. She does not stop. She does not look at me. She says, barely above a breath, "He only does this when he is nervous." You are getting close. 3 days later, a message arrives in my personal email inbox. It comes from an address I do not immediately recognize, a name I know only vaguely, because we have exchanged perhaps 4 words in the 2 years I have worked at Arctis Solutions. His name is Hugo Staines. He is a senior software developer, the kind of precise, quiet professional who sits near the back of every meeting and speaks only when he has something exact to say. His message is 11 words long. I saw what happened in the boardroom. I kept quiet before, then, after a line break, not this time. I stare at it for several minutes. Then I type 2 words in reply, "Thank you." The following morning, a compressed file appears in my personal inbox, sent from a private account, not the company server. Inside are 6 internal system logs. They show Fabian Ware accessing the shared project folder on 3 separate occasions during the 2 weeks before his presentation. The timestamps record him opening, reading, and on one occasion downloading the complete draft at 20 past 11 on a Wednesday night. He had not been assigned to that project. He had no authorized reason to access those files at that hour. Taken alone, a determined person could argue that it was a coincidence. Fabian could claim curiosity, oversight, and general interest. But a thread is a thread, solid, timestamped, system verified, and now I have one in my hand. I save the files in 3 separate locations. And I begin to think carefully about what comes next. 2 weeks after the all-staff briefing, Fabian calls me into his office. He is cheerful in the way that people are cheerful when they believe they hold every advantage. He tells me that a major new project has been approved, a full digital transformation strategy for a prominent client in the financial services sector. It is going to be a significant piece of work, he says. I want you on the team, Dara. Working directly with me. Supporting the strategic development. I know what I am hearing immediately. The concept, migrating a legacy financial infrastructure to an integrated cloud platform, delivered in staged rollout phases, is almost word for word the speculative framework I drafted and sent to Fabian 6 weeks ago, asking for his feedback. He never replied to that document. Now here it is, wearing his name. I consider my position. If I refuse the assignment, I will be logged as uncooperative, which, combined with my performance review, gives human resources exactly the grounds they need to begin formal proceedings. If I accept, I spend the next 3 months building something he will, once again, stand up and claim in front of the board. I look at him across his desk. I would love to be involved, I say. Thank you for the opportunity. He looks exactly as settled as I need him to look. He has done this before. It has always worked before. He has no reason to believe this time will be any different. What he does not know, cannot know, is that I am not simply reacting to him anymore. I am already planning. The project begins on the first Monday of February. For 3 weeks, I work exactly as Fabian expects, reliably, diligently, producing detailed frameworks and strategy documents and feeding them to him through the usual shared folder on the company server. Except that everything I give him has been quietly and carefully altered. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would be visible at a glance, a transposition in the phasing timeline here. A cost projection built on a slightly incorrect assumption there. A client segmentation model with a foundational variable that appears correct on first reading but will not hold up under direct questioning. Each flaw is subtle enough that a person reviewing the work quickly would not catch it. Each one is something I could correct in 2 minutes, because I know exactly where it is hidden. Meanwhile, I am building the real version on a personal device. The complete, accurate, properly evidenced strategy, backed up, timestamped, with a clean version history that is entirely and verifiably mine. Hugo Staines sends me a brief message one evening. How is it going? Slowly, I write back. But forward. I do not share the specifics yet. Not because I distrust him, but because the fewer people who know the exact shape of what I am doing, the more control I keep over the outcome. Doris Farr passes me in the corridor twice during the week. She does not speak. On the second occasion, she glances at me in a way that might, in other circumstances, be described as approval. For the first time in months, I feel like I am standing on ground that will hold. The project review meeting is held on a Thursday afternoon in the fourth-floor conference room. 12 people are present, senior leadership, 2 client representatives, and the heads of 4 internal divisions. Fabian presents at the front of the room with the ease of a man who has rehearsed and expects to be believed. He clicks through the slides. He talks through the phasing model. He reaches the cost projection. I wait. The first stage rollout, he says, will be resourced across the second and third quarters, with a net efficiency saving of approximately. One of the client representatives interrupts him. A composed and direct woman, Miss Aduk, from the client's internal audit team. She has caught something in the numbers. Could you walk us through the assumptions behind that projection? She asks. How was the baseline cost model derived? Fabian hesitates for precisely 1 second. I catch it. I doubt anyone else does. Of course, he says. But he cannot. Because he did not build it. He absorbed it without understanding it, which means that when pressed with a technical question, there is nothing beneath the surface to offer. He asks me to support. I clarify 1 figure. Then a second. The room grows quieter. He stumbles over the segmentation model. I offer a gentle correction. His jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. Then he calls the meeting to a close, a technical matter, he says. They will reconvene shortly. He looks at me once as the room empties. He knows that I know. And now he is frightened. He finds me in the stairwell between the 3rd and 4th floors, 20 minutes after the meeting. He has composed himself, the flush from the conference room is gone. His voice is measured. But something in his eyes is different. He is no longer performing the role of disappointed manager or patient mentor. He is simply a man who feels cornered. That was clever, he says. What exactly do you think you were doing? I say nothing. You want to go to war over a presentation? He steps closer. I have been at this company for 11 years, Dara. I have relationships with people whose names you have never even heard. I can end your career here, not with a scene, not with an argument, but with 1 quiet telephone call and a signed reference that says absolutely nothing in your favor. He says it without raising his voice. That is the most chilling part. My hands are trembling. I press them against my sides so he cannot see them. I told myself I had prepared for this moment, but standing in a stairwell and being told, calmly and without visible malice, that you can be professionally destroyed is a completely different experience from imagining it in your own flat. I look at him steadily. Thank you for the feedback, I say. It is the most precise thing I can offer in that moment. I walk past him and down the stairs. My knees are unreliable on every step. But somewhere beneath the fear, and the fear is entirely real, I will not pretend otherwise, something else has settled quietly into place. He is scared. And that changes everything. Doris Farr appears at my desk the following Tuesday morning, before most of the office has arrived. She places a plain white envelope beside my keyboard and walks away without a word. I open it in my lap, below the line of the partition. Inside is a printed set of pages, system access logs from the archive server, covering a 4-year period. They show an administrative account accessing the ground floor project archive room outside of standard working hours on 14 separate occasions. The account is registered to Fabian Ware. But that is not the most significant thing Doris has found. Clipped to the access logs are screenshots, still images retrieved from the building's internal security database through the archive's linked storage system. They show a figure seated at a ground floor archive terminal at 10:47 on a Thursday evening. The timestamp corresponds precisely to one of the access log entries. The image quality is imperfect. But it is sufficient. The figure is recognizable, and the open files visible on the terminal screen, caught in the upper portion of the image, bear the title of a project developed by the data specialist who later transferred to Aberdeen and resigned. I sit very still and read these pages twice. The story they tell is not one of isolated opportunism or a single lapse of judgment under pressure. It is deliberate. It is repeated. And it has been carefully managed. The people who left this company did not leave because they underperformed. They were systematically stripped of their professional standing and quietly removed. I am next in that line. Unless I move first. Miss Boss from Human Resources calls me on Wednesday of the following week. Her voice is courteous and entirely neutral. She would like me to come in for a follow-up meeting on Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock, just to close the loop on the review process. I know what this is before I enter the room. There is a single document on the table when I arrive. It is typed on company letterhead, with 2 signature lines at the bottom. One is already signed by Fabian Ware, dated the previous day. A settlement agreement. Voluntary departure, 4 weeks' pay. A standard non-disclosure clause. Fabian is seated across the table from me, wearing the expression he always wears in meetings of consequence, calm, considered, vaguely sorrowful, as though the decision has been made by forces larger than himself and he is merely there to help me understand it. This is a generous offer, Miss Boss says. We would like everything resolved smoothly. She places a pen on the table in front of me. I look at it. The room is very quiet. A clock ticks somewhere above the door. I am acutely aware that my hands are in my lap and that I am gripping my own fingers quite tightly beneath the table. I think of the data specialist in Aberdeen. The project coordinator whose records were scrubbed. The one who left without a forwarding note or explanation. I pick up the pen. I slide it back across the table. No, I say quietly. Thank you. Something shifts in Fabian's posture. Just slightly. Just enough. Before either of them can respond, the meeting room door opens. Hugo Staines walks in. He is carrying a laptop and a small portable drive and he does not apologize for entering without knocking. He addresses Miss Boss directly, with the quiet authority of someone who has chosen exactly what he is going to say and has no intention of being redirected. I apologize for the interruption, he says. I believe the company's senior oversight committee should be made aware of certain information before this meeting proceeds any further. Miss Boss sits forward. This is a private human resources meeting, Mr. Staines. I am fully aware of that, he says. I have already forwarded the relevant material to the committee chair and to the company's legal counsel. This is a courtesy copy for the room. He sets the laptop on the table, connects the drive, and opens a folder. He turns the screen to face the room. Fabian Ware stares at it. His expression shifts once, quickly, and then locks into stillness. I do not look at Fabian. I watch Miss Boss, because she is the person with the authority to stop what is about to happen, and I need to know, in the next 30 seconds, whether she is going to use it. She closes her notebook deliberately and sets her pen beside it. She folds her hands on the table and looks at Hugo Staines with the expression of someone who has suspected something for a long time and is now watching the evidence arrange itself into a shape she can no longer ignore. Hugo begins to speak. The room is absolutely still. The screen is filled with evidence. Hugo talks through it in sequence, the system access logs, the file timestamps, the metadata recovered from 3 years' worth of project documents. He narrates each item carefully and without drama, in the manner of someone who understands the material down to its foundations. The logs are unambiguous. Fabian Ware accessed files he had no authorized reason to view, on dates that precede his own credited presentations by days or hours. In each case, the original author's version of the document was opened, its file name was altered, and it was resubmitted under a new metadata header bearing Fabian's name. It is not a theory. It is a record. Fabian tries to speak twice. The first time, he begins with "this is entirely out of context" and stops before he reaches the end of the sentence. The second time, he says something about collaborative development and shared authorship, and his voice catches on the second word, telling everyone present exactly what they need to know. A murmur moves through the room. Then Doris Farr steps inside. She has been waiting in the corridor. I understand now, watching her enter, that she and Hugo planned this together, that this entrance is deliberate and precisely timed. She is carrying a thicker file than the one she handed me weeks ago. She sets it on the table and opens it. Inside are printed records covering 6 full years, names, project titles, submission dates, departure dates, arranged in a sequence so clear that anyone glancing at it can see exactly what it means. Doris Farr looks up and begins to speak. Dora speaks quietly. She always speaks quietly. But in a room that has gone completely silent, quiet carries an extraordinary distance. She explains that she has worked in the Records and Archive Department at Arctis Solutions for 9 years. In her first 2 years, she began noticing small discrepancies, version histories that did not match official project credits, deleted drafts retained in backup logs, metadata edits bearing timestamps inconsistent with the claimed author's access history. She started keeping her own record. Not out of malice, she says. Out of the precise, particular instinct of someone whose entire professional purpose is to ensure that the archive reflects what actually happened. This is not one incident, she says, addressing Miss Boss directly. This is not a collaborative misunderstanding or an ambiguity about shared authorship. This is a structured practice that has operated in this building for at least 6 years and has resulted in the removal of at least 5 employees who were professionally harmed in the process. She places her hand flat on the open file. The people in this record did not leave this company because they underperformed. They left because they were stripped of their professional standing, quietly discredited, and pushed out through exactly the procedural mechanisms that are being used against Miss Whitmore today. The air in the room shifts. It is a physical sensation, the kind of shift that happens when authority changes hands without anyone formally declaring it. Miss Boss looks from the file to Fabian Ware. Her expression has finally moved past neutral. Something in it has resolved into a decision. She picks up her phone and begins to dial. The meeting room door opens a second time. Arctis Solutions Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Bernard Ashby, enters. He does not knock. He does not look at Fabian Ware as he comes in, which is itself an answer to an unasked question. Mr. Ashby is a measured, methodical person, the kind of man who schedules everything and controls every room he enters. The fact that he is here, unannounced, standing in a human resources meeting with his hands at his sides and his expression set, tells me clearly that someone has already been in contact with him. That he has already been listening. He sits down at the head of the table. He looks at the screen. He looks at the open file. He does not speak for a long moment. Then he turns to Miss Boss. How long has this information been available? She begins to answer. He raises one hand briefly. He turns to Doris Farr instead. You said 5 employees. At minimum, she says. He is quiet again. Then something changes in his expression, a compression around the eyes, a tightening of the jaw. One of those names, he says, is my niece. The room absorbs this in silence. She had joined Arctis Solutions 3 years ago as a junior research analyst. She had left after 8 months, carrying a poor performance reference and no satisfactory explanation. She had not told her uncle what had happened. She had simply packed her things and gone. For 3 years, that departure had no answer. Fabian Ware's mouth opens. Then closes. For the first time since I have known him, he has absolutely nothing to say. What follows happens quickly, then slowly, then quickly again. Fabian attempts once more to speak. He uses the phrase team misunderstandings. Then collaborative working environments. Then something about multiple perspectives on project ownership, each sentence shorter and less coherent than the last, with the quality of a person trying several doors in sequence and finding every one locked. Mr. Ashby does not argue with him. He does not raise his voice or make any formal declaration. He says only, I think we are finished here, and turns toward the corridor. 2 members of the building's security staff are already positioned just outside the meeting room door's glass panel. I do not know when they arrived. I did not notice them until this moment. Doris Farr, I observe, does not appear surprised. Fabian stands. He looks around the room once, at Miss Boss, at the screen, at the file, at me, and for the first time in the 2 years I have worked alongside him, I see him without any of the performance. Without the satisfaction, the pity, or the calculated warmth. He looks precisely like a man standing in a room where everything has stopped working. Security escorts him off the floor. The room stays very still for a moment after he goes. Then, gradually, people begin to breathe again. A pen clicks. A water glass is set down on the table. Someone coughs softly. I look at my hands in my lap. They are steady now, which surprises me. I thought, when this moment arrived, it would feel enormous. What it actually feels like is very quiet. Like a door closing on something that should have ended a long time ago. The company releases an internal statement the following Monday morning. It acknowledges that an internal review has identified significant irregularities in project attribution over an extended period and states that a thorough audit will be conducted. Former members of staff who may have been affected will be contacted directly. It does not name Fabian Ware. It does not need to. By Monday afternoon, every person at Arctis Solutions understands precisely what has happened. The audit team reaches out to the former employees identified in Doris's file. The data specialist in Aberdeen responds within a day. The project coordinator, who has spent the past 3 years working for a smaller firm on the other side of the city, responds within 2. The third, the one whose records had been most thoroughly scrubbed, takes longer to locate, but the legal team finds her. Hugo Staines sends me a message on Tuesday morning. It reads, "You held your nerve. Well done." I keep my reply brief, "We held it together, because that is the truth. I did not do this alone, and I have no intention of allowing anyone to remember it as though I did." Doris Farr does not send a message. She does not need to. On Thursday, I see her in the corridor near the archive room, carrying the same neat stack of folders she always carries. She looks up. She nods once. From Doris Farr, I have come to understand that a nod is the equivalent of a standing ovation. I nod back. And I go upstairs to begin the real work. 6 weeks after that Friday meeting, I stand in the same boardroom where it all began. The floor-to-ceiling windows face the same gray sweep of Hillcroft Business Park. The mahogany table is the same. The seats are arranged identically. The overhead lights cast the same long rectangles across the polished wood. But every other thing about this moment is different. My name is on the presentation. My name is on the printed agenda placed at each seat. Mr. Ashby is seated at the head of the table, and beside him are the same client representatives who were in the room the day Fabian stumbled over figures he had never truly understood. I stand at the podium. I open with the project overview, move through the phasing model, and present the cost projection, the real one, with every assumption laid out clearly, every variable named and explained. I take questions and answer each one not because I have memorized responses, but because I have built this strategy and know it down to its foundations. The applause is generous. It sounds entirely different from the last time I heard it in this room. Because this time it is mine. I do not feel triumphant. Triumph suggests the point was to win something. The point was never that. The point was simply that the truth should sit in the right place, credited honestly, standing under its own name, belonging to the person who actually built it. Not revenge. Justice. As the room begins to clear, I notice someone near the back who was not on the agenda. She is holding a folder and smiling, just slightly, just enough. Doris Farr. The one no one paid attention to. The one who had been paying attention to everything, and who changed everything. If this story moved you, hit the like button and subscribe for a new episode every day, and tell us in the comments, who has been your Doris Farr? Someone quiet, someone overlooked, who showed up at exactly the right moment and made all the difference. We read every single comment, and we cannot wait to hear your story.